So think about this for a second. In the 1920s, you have this thriving district in Tulsa, right? And it loses $41 million basically overnight.
Yeah, just completely wiped out.
Exactly. And then go back to the 1850s, an entire middle-class village is literally erased from the map so they could build Central Park.
Right.
And now, cut to today, an AI deepfake can rewrite, your entire personal reputation in a matter of milliseconds.
It is wild how fast it happens now.
It really is. And on the surface, you look at these three things, and they seem like completely unrelated events, right? But if you actually look closely at the mechanics, they all follow the exact same mathematical formula of social erasure.
Yeah, and that is exactly what Almonte's framework gives us. It's a way to measure that exact formula. We're looking at this landscape of reality that is constantly being overwritten.
Wow, yeah.
And the scary part is the historical artifact itself is silently replaced before anyone even notices it's gone.
Right. So welcome to this Deep Dive, everyone. Today, our mission is to explore a dense, honestly, truly mind-bending theoretical framework by Alvin D. Almonte Jr.
It is definitely a heavy one.
Oh, for sure. We are digging into a piece of his larger work, which is called The Muted Skies Canon. Specifically, we're looking at Volume 8, titled The Muted Self.
Right. The focus today is really decoding the mechanics.
Exactly. We're breaking down what Almonte calls communal social erasure and this concept of the universal law of memory collapse.
Yeah.
Essentially, we want to look at how individual identities and even entire communities are systematically erased and then replaced by, manufactured realities.
And, for anyone listening, this isn't just about, high school bullying or bad PR.
No, not at all.
We are talking about a structural law that operates identically across 3,000 years of history. I mean, from the defacement of the Egyptian pharaoh Hatshepsut's monuments all the way to the digital algorithms shaping your news feeds today.
It's massive. And the real breakthrough here, I think, is that Almonte provides a diagnostic fingerprint to actually detect this erasure, right?
Yes, exactly. Because usually this feels like a subjective personal grievance, that awful feeling of being misunderstood or gaslit or just quietly pushed out of a space.
Which is the worst feeling.
Right. But this framework shifts that into a measurable structural science. We can look at an archive, a paper trail, or even a company's HR records and mathematically prove that an erasure occurred.
Okay, let's unpack this. I want to start at the micro scale, just the individual person.
Yeah.
How does a single person's authentic reality actually get overwritten by a group?
Well, Almonte defines this communal social erasure as a process where an authentic signal,
meaning your true self, right?
Yeah.
Like your actual actions.
Exactly. Your true signal is drowned out by manufactured noise. And it's not just people ignoring you, right? It is this coordinated silence or a totally false narrative that just entirely replaces your presence in that space.
Man. So how does that noise become the new reality?
To understand that, we really have to look at a concept the source calls inverted recursive weight.
Okay, what is that?
So normally, if multiple independent people tell you it's raining outside, you trust it's raining.
Right, because they're all saying the same thing separately.
Exactly. That independent verification is recursive weight proving a truth. But in social erasure, this mechanic is weaponized. You have a group of people who are not independent. They are correlated.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They might share the same hidden motive or the same social circle, but they all repeat the same false narrative about a target.
So to an outside observer, it looks like a unanimous consensus.
Yes, exactly.
It becomes an objective fact in that social environment simply because of the sheer volume and consistency of the noise. It's like joining a group chat where everyone has already agreed you are the villain before you even type your first word.
That is a perfect analogy.
Right. Every neutral thing you say is read as hostile, and eventually you just stop typing, which brings us to how that room gets rigged in the first place.
Right, the setup.
Yeah, Almonte outlines a 6-stage pre-arrival sequence, and I really want to walk through this slowly because it's honestly terrifyingly recognizable.
It really is. The intentionality here, whether it's a conscious conspiracy or just some emergent social dynamic, it really reveals itself in these stages. So stage 1 is pre-arrival seeding.
Right.
This is where the negative narrative is distributed through a network's key connectors before the target even enters the room. So the seeds are planted.
And then comes stage 2, which is witness pre-positioning. And I found this fascinating.
Yeah, it changes everything.
Wait, so they aren't just gossiping. They're actually giving people a specific lens through which to view my next action.
That is the core of stage 2.
Mm.
The people in the room aren't neutral observers anymore. They are primed.
Wow.
So if the pre-arrival seed was that you are, say, aggressive, then the moment you speak passionately about a project, those prepositioned witnesses don't see enthusiasm.
They see the aggression they were told to expect.
Exactly. They are actively looking for confirmation.
That immediately leads into stage 3, which the source calls active invisibility performance.
Right.
And it's not just that they don't notice the target. They actively perform the act of looking right through them.
It becomes a status broadcast. Ignoring the target proves your loyalty to the in-group.
Which sets the trap for stage 4, right? Reaction monitoring. The group basically just waits.
Yeah, they apply this immense social pressure and simply watch the target, just waiting for that inevitable moment when the target reacts to being treated this way.
And when that reaction happens, bam, we hit stage 5. Selective archiving. This is the brutal part.
It is.
A target finally gets frustrated, maybe they snap, or maybe they just completely withdraw. And that reaction is what gets circulated and saved.
Right, while the pre-arrival coordination, the whispering, the active invisibility.
All of that is hidden.
Exactly. But the target's reaction is archived as proof of their instability.
Completing the sequence with stage 6, normalization. New people enter the group, they inherit this selectively archived reaction, and the manufactured baseline just becomes the unquestioned truth.
The new person just assumes the target is difficult because, I mean, the only evidence available points to that conclusion.
It's so insidious. And the tragedy of going through those 6 stages is what Almonte calls the hollowing. This is like the terminal stage.
Yeah, the psychological toll.
Right. The target is subjected to this distortion for so long that they start to pre-edit themselves. Think about, typing a text message, deleting it, retyping it to sound less demanding, deleting it again, and then just not sending anything at all.
You self-suppress to survive this false model imposed on you. You shrink.
Exactly. There's no correct response left. If you fight, you're aggressive. If you withdraw, you're guilty. So you just hollow out.
The toll is immense, but from a diagnostic perspective, it brings up a massive challenge.
Okay, what is that?
Well, if the pre-arrival sequence is mostly whispers and active invisibility, where is the hard evidence? If we want to treat this as a structural science, we need proof.
Right.
The framework answers this by introducing the structural asymmetry fingerprint.
Okay, I have to admit, I'm struggling with this part a bit.
Yeah.
If the provocation is literally invisible and unrecorded, isn't this just confirmation bias?
I get why you'd think that.
Like, how can Almonte claim this is an objective science if the evidence of the setup isn't even there? Are we just taking the target's word for it?
It sounds counterintuitive, but the gap itself is the evidence. This is the whole concept of provocation engineering and the Reaction First Archive Index, or RFAI.
The RFAI, right.
Yeah. The fingerprint of systematic erasure is that the official record consistently starts mid-sequence.
Oh, I see.
Right. So if you look at an archive and see that a person's file is filled entirely with their explosive or erratic reactions, but there's never a single documented cause.
That structural asymmetry is the fingerprint.
Exactly. The sheer statistical improbability of someone constantly reacting to literally nothing proves that the archive was selectively curated to omit the initiating provocations.
Okay, that makes total sense now.
Okay.
And the source points to Harold Garfinkel's breaching experiment from the mid-20th century to back this up, right?
Yes, Garfinkel proved this beautifully.
He showed that when a social norm is violated subtly, observers instinctively blame the person who reacts loudly, not the person who quietly provoked them.
Right, like if someone quietly cuts you in line and you yell at them.
The rest of the store turns and looks at you as the problem.
Exactly. And this dynamic, it scales all the way up to state-level surveillance. The framework actually examines the FBI's COINTEL profiles from the 1970s.
And just to be clear for the listeners, we're just reporting on the historical analysis provided in the source here, not taking any political stance.
Right, absolutely. The source just uses the declassified documents, which officially recorded the use of this exact tactic against civil rights leaders. Agents were actually trained to stage deniable provocations.
Like sending anonymous letters, slashing tires, creating friction.
Exactly. And the official archive would only capture the target's reaction. So if a target bought a weapon because they were receiving anonymous death threats engineered by the agency, the archive completely omitted the death threats.
Right. It only recorded the raid where the target was found to be armed and dangerous.
Yep. The provocation was omitted by design, framing the target as inherently unstable.
That is chilling. But we see this weaponized in everyday life, too, don't we? The framework talks about the joke that lands too clean. This is such a brilliant everyday metric for erasure.
I love this example. Describe what happens in the room during that kind of joke.
Okay, so if someone makes a joke at another person's expense, like a cruel joke or one that crosses a professional boundary, and the whole room just bursts into unanimous laughter with absolutely zero discomfort or hesitation,
Right.
it is proof the room was already preceded against the target.
Because in a normal environment, a cruel joke creates like a beat of awkwardness. People glance at each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But if the laughter is clean and instant, the target's erasure was already normalized before the punchline was even delivered.
And if you were the one person in the room who didn't laugh, you feel the weight of that manufactured baseline.
Oh, for sure. The unified laughter of the room creates this invisible wall. It tells you that if you speak up, you are the one violating the social norm.
No, the mechanism pivots here in a really dangerous way. The framework shifts from erasing someone's past to hijacking their future.
Okay, behavioral baseline hurting.
Yes, it's not just about erasing the signal anymore. It's about engineering the environment, so the target's forward motion toward a desired destination is the only option left.
I think of it like a Venus flytrap, right? The promise of belonging or success is the nectar. It smells sweet, it draws you in.
Yeah.
But once you step inside,
The severance phase kicks in. It acts like those microscopic hairs inside the trap. The moment you brush against them, the leaves trigger.
and by the time the bug realizes the nectar is gone, the exit is already sealed.
Exactly. So let's break down that four-phase sequence of herding. Phase one is the promise. It's a lure, maybe belonging, a promotion, or safety.
And phase 2 is severance. And crucially, severance happens while the promise is still active.
Right. The target feels like they're transitioning towards something great, so they don't even fight it when their return path to their old life or their external support system is just quietly cut off.
Which leads right into phase 3, withdrawal. The promise suddenly becomes conditional.
The warmth is pulled back.
Yeah, and the target is now in a closed space. They can't go back because their ties were severed in phase 2,
And they can't stay comfortably without complying with whatever new rules are suddenly imposed.
which is phase 4, conditional reaccess. It's basically weaponized learned helplessness. They learn that they only get tiny little breadcrumb pieces of that original promise if they completely submit to the group's terms.
And the archive for this is what Almonte calls the approach-first archive index. To an outside observer, the optical illusion is just perfect.
How so?
Well, it just looks like the target is desperately pursuing the group. The record shows the pursuit, right? The emails asking for approval, the late hours worked, but it completely omits the severed exit that actually caused the desperation.
Wow, and the most insidious part is what Almonte calls the sealing mechanism.
Oh, this part is rough.
Let's say the target realizes they are trapped. They try to explain it to someone outside the group. They describe the severed ties, the withdrawn promise, the sudden coldness. How does that sound to an outsider?
They sound paranoid.
Exactly, they sound obsessed.
Ah.
Because the observers only see the target's pursuit.
So the target's own accurate description of the trap becomes the exact evidence the group uses to validate the false narrative that the target is just unstable.
Yeah, it's a perfect trap. So if this can happen to one person in a boardroom or in a relationship, what happens when the target is an entire zip code?
Right. Can a system herd 10,000 people at once?
This is where we transition to macro-scale erasure. Almonte argues that the individual is a village and the village is an individual.
The exact same mechanics we just discussed apply to entire civilizations and economies.
Right. And the source illustrates this with the displacement of Seneca Village in the 1850s. This was a thriving community in New York. But before anyone was physically moved to build Central Park, the press coordinated a pre-arrival narrative.
Newspapers started calling this community of documented middle-class property owners a shanty town full of squatters.
They manufactured a baseline to justify the removal.
And that false baseline was accepted as historical truth for over a century.
Which is crazy to think about. It wasn't until archaeological excavations in 2011 dug up stone foundations and proof of a thriving middle-class infrastructure that the narrative was challenged. The paper archive said shantytown, the physical ground said otherwise.
This introduces wealth trajectory inversion. Erasure at this scale isn't just about losing your story in the history books. It is a literal economic reassignment. Wealth paths are severed, and that compounding value is rerouted to new actors.
The 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre in the Greenwood District is a stark example of this. Again, looking purely at the factual mechanisms here as presented in the source. 35 square blocks of thriving economic infrastructure destroyed.
Right.
Adjusted for today, $41 million in property was lost, and $1.8 million in insurance claims were completely denied by the system.
Yeah.
But that wealth didn't just vanish into thin air.
No, the market share, the customer base, the compounding value of those severed businesses over the next century, it was absorbed and reconstituted by competitors in the broader system who didn't face that disruption.
The inversion reroutes the trajectory. It's like someone pulling the ladder up while you're climbing and then 50 years later pointing at your grandkids and saying, look, they just don't like to climb.
Exactly. And you see chronic institutional inversions with things like the Homeowners Loan Corporation redlining maps from the 1930s. The government produced maps labeling certain neighborhoods as hazardous for investment.
Which functions as the pre-arrival sequence at a federal scale.
Yes. Labeling a neighborhood as hazardous ensured it received no mortgage investment. And the lack of investment created the exact deterioration the label originally predicted.
Right, the manufactured baseline became a self-fulfilling prophecy, and the economic divergence compounding from that era is still measurable today. It really makes you wonder, though, if it was incredibly difficult for an entire community like Seneca Village to fight a false newspaper narrative in 1855, how do we stand a chance today?
That is the big question.
Because we're living in an era where AI can generate a synthetic consensus and a deepfake provocation in, milliseconds?
Yeah, the modern era acts as an AI accelerator for these ancient mechanics. The framework actually warns about asymmetrical machine memory.
Oh, right. Because digital platforms are explicitly designed to preserve screen-recordable emotional reactions. The algorithms reward outrage.
Exactly. But they are terrible at preserving the subtle sequential provocations that cause those reactions. So the algorithm naturally curates the reaction-first archive index on a global scale.
And then you add synthetic consensus on top of that.
Right. Generative AI and bot swarms can just flood a network. They create the illusion of overwhelming public agreement without actual humans even participating.
They manufacture the inverted recursive weight?
Yes. If 100,000 bot accounts agree on a false premise, real human beings will literally start to doubt their own eyes.
Not to mention deepfakes, which turn a false rumor into a visual, durable artifact. You aren't just fighting a whisper network in the office anymore. You are fighting a completely fabricated video.
And the damage of this erasure is profoundly deep. It isn't just digital or psychological. The source points out that it is biological.
Wow.
Yeah. Genomic research on Alaska Natives and studies of Holocaust survivors at Mount Sinai show that the trauma of civilizational erasure actually transmits epigenetically.
So it changes the expression of the genes themselves.
Yes. The baseline for stress hormones, the biological dysregulation, it's passed down to descendants who never even experienced the original event.
The hollowing we talked about earlier, where the target shrinks to survive, it goes all the way down to the cellular level.
It really does, which makes the need for an antidote absolutely critical.
Right. So how do individuals or communities survive this kind of memory collapse?
Almonte outlines a recovery architecture called signal re-anchoring.
Okay, how does that work?
This relies on finding what the framework calls bilingual witnesses. These are people or even contexts completely outside the contaminated social network.
Ah, so they had to be uncontaminated so they can recognize your original baseline.
Exactly, and they receive your authentic signal without the haze of the manufactured noise filtering their perception.
It's like finding a compass in a native speaker after you've been spun around blindfolded in a foreign country for years. You finally have an external reference point.
Which is exactly what is needed for victims of hurting. The process is called restoring the navigational baseline. It's not enough to just be seen clearly by someone.
Right.
The target needs external reference points to evaluate what is normal again. They need temporal anchoring, understanding exactly when the shift happened, and structural naming.
Structural naming. So,
Right.
meaning giving them the vocabulary to say, this was phase 2, severance, rather than just feeling crazy.
Yes. Naming the mechanism dismantles its power.
And at the civilizational scale, this is why museums, archives, and language immersion schools are so incredibly critical. They act as institutional bilingual witnesses.
Because without that active custodial agency, memory just defaults to degradation. The system will naturally just reabsorb the truth right back into the noise.
It's profound. The sheer scale of Almonte's framework is what makes it so vital. I mean, from a single employee silenced in a corporate office to a partner trapped in a coercive relationship to the destruction of entire historical villages.
The mechanics of erasure are identical.
And understanding those mechanics gives you a superpower. If you're listening to this, you can now look at any conflict, any news story, or any office drama and ask yourself, am I looking at the provocation or just the reaction? Is the linchpin missing from this archive?
It really forces you to question the very structure of the information you were receiving, rather than just passively accepting the consensus.
Exactly. And I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over. This builds on what the source calls the knowing witness.
This is a powerful concept.
Yeah, think about the spaces you occupy. The framework tells us that communal erasure doesn't actually require a room full of malicious villains plotting your downfall. It only requires a room full of quote-unquote good people who decide that speaking up is just too socially expensive.
Wow. Yeah.
So, the next time you witness a joke that lands a little too clean at someone else's expense, ask yourself, are you just an innocent bystander? Or is your silence the exact mortar being used to build a manufactured reality? What if the difference between a surviving truth and an erased history is simply you?
History isn't just an artifact waiting to be dug up. It is an active process. If we aren't careful, we are just looking at a picture someone else painted over the lens.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us. Keep questioning the archive.